Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rybicki. If you're interested in continuing to learn more about jazz bass, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, check for a link below for a free PDF of this bass line that we're talking about. So if you're old like me, I'm 50, and Gen X, and you had something to do with jazz in the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, you know this arrangement of the Juan Teasel / Duke Ellington composition, Caravan. When a bass player plays this bass line, anybody that's familiar with that period of jazz music pretty much knows what you're playing. It was sort of that popular and really sort of made its way around the community as like, wow, this is a really cool arrangement. On Standard Time Volume 1, on Wynton's record, they took familiar tunes and rearranged them in really interesting and sophisticated ways. And I think this helped to propel Wynton even further forward in popularity because he took this familiar material. His previous album, Black Coats from the Underground, is an absolute tour de force, and I highly recommend checking that out as well if you haven't heard that yet. But on Standard Time, he's doing kind of familiar tunes. Caravan is a lot of fun to play on. It's a little bit of an odd form, but it's not impossible to do. You have a lot of time to develop ideas on one sound. The C7 flat 9 is typically the color of the sound in the majority of the A sections, and that resolves to F minor. The bridge is usually swung, which they do in this version as well. And having this C7 flat 9 just allows for lots of possibilities of funky sounds to explore. And you've got quite a bit of time to do that before it resolves to this F minor 7. Now on this particular bass line, as I mentioned in the two-feel video, we're talking about a specific kind of rhythm that is really important in New Orleans, and that is the Bamboula, or also called the tresillo rhythm. This is a rhythm of the African diaspora that came up through the Caribbean during the time of enslaved people in the States. And it is almost like a rhythmic key or a clave to the rhythms of New Orleans. Wynton Marsalis is from New Orleans. It makes sense that he would have Robert Hurst, the bass player, play this on this arrangement. So we've got this basic rhythm that's very important to play. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, which is great. But what's interesting in the A sections, what they do is they take that tresillo, Bamboula rhythm, and shift it over by a beat. They actually purposefully and very, very carefully move it over so that it sounds displaced. So in this way of doing it, when we're going into bar 13, into that F minor 7, we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 1, like that. So they're taking that whole rhythmic little cell and moving it over purposefully and very deliberately. It happens every time. So they weren't just messing around. They were doing something very important, or at least very hip in my eyes. It resolves to this F minor, but at the same time, there's not quite resolution because something weird rhythmically is happening. So it's got this continued suspended feel that happens from earlier in the A's. In the B section, Robert walks. They do play a walking feel here, and he's got some really interesting lines, a lot of activity, a lot of just very aggressive forward motion, which we love, which is great. At the end of this bridge, though, is really interesting, a little sort of metric modulation that he and the pianist do with this triplet figure that kind of sounds like they're going into another meter, while the drummer sounds like he's staying in a different time. And so that also gives a sense of suspension or tension at the end of the bridge going into the last A section. This is so much fun to play. And as I say, if you play this bass line, you will pretty much invite anybody of my generation or around there to understand what your intention is right away. The notes are really simple. We've got C, B flat, C, G, B flat, C. This would be the 3rd fret on electric on the A string, the 3rd fret on the E string, the 1st fret on the A string, and the 3rd fret again on the A string. When it goes to the F minor, you still have this same basic idea, but it all shifts up, basically a 4th. And then the walking is kind of all over the place. There's that moment of suspension right at the beginning of the bridge as well with that held C. So that's an interesting moment as well. So I recommend that you checked out this simple but really effective line. I think that you'll find it very useful at jam sessions, and you'll be able to communicate very quickly what your vision of a tune is. I really recommend checking out this album as well, Wynton Marsalis Standard Time Volume 1. What they did with these tunes is really clever and a very high level of sort of clever deception. Check out, for extra credit, what they do on Autumn Leaves. And if anybody can tell me what the structure of the main melody is, how the arrangement's happening in the comments, you get extra credit. And I don't know, maybe I'll send you something too. Nonetheless, it's a very, very simple but extraordinarily clever thing that is happening on the head to Autumn Leaves. So check that out. Thanks for joining me today for this short lesson on Caravan. I hope that you found it useful. As always, like, subscribe, look for a link for this bass line below, and always remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.